Hi guys, patch 9.1 is around the corner. There is no release date for it yet, but for those of you who are aware, it's going to change a lot of things in the game. In fact, there are so many changes in 9.1 for World of Tanks that I'm probably going to have to cover it over 2 videos. So I think this video I'm just going to be covering the tank changes. There are going to be a lot of nerfs and a lot of buffs to overperforming and underperforming tanks. And again, the changes that have been released so far are only preliminary changes. They're not the final patch notes, but this is just going to give you a taster of what's going to be happening in 9.1. There are a lot of other changes that I'm going to cover in another video, but this is just about the nerfs and the buffs. So to kick off, as you all probably know, or maybe not, there are going to be major tank destroyer nerfs across the board. And the major nerf is that tank destroyers have camo ratings. All tanks have camo ratings, but tank destroyers have very, very good camo ratings, especially when stationary. And they're going to maintain those camo ratings. They're going to have the same camo ratings on the move and stationary. But what is going to happen in 9.1 is that when tank destroyers fire their guns, they're going to lose all of their camo value. So tank destroyers who like to camp at the back of the map, who like to use lots of bushes for cover, like to shoot through bushes and remain undetected, well, unfortunately, that's not really going to happen anymore. There are going to be more and more tank destroyers detected when they fire their guns. It's not going to affect some tank destroyers that much, for example, heavily armored tank destroyers like the Jagdtiger, but it is going to affect more lightly armored tank destroyers that rely on their camo rating to stay safe, for example, the Borsig. And while this is a major nerf for all tank destroyers, I think the better players will figure ways around it. For example, I can already think of, rather than sitting behind a bush and firing your gun, I can see myself maybe playing a tank destroyer sitting behind a bush, spotting an enemy tank, and then reversing 15 meters before firing, so that the bush's camo rating is still effective. But we'll see. There is no way to know until the patch actually hits. So the first vehicle nerf is a blanket nerf for the tank destroyers when they lose all their camo rating on firing their guns. Another thing I'm happy and maybe even a little bit sad in some ways about is Wargaming have promised for a long time that they're going to be looking at tank balancing at the lower tiers as well as the upper tiers. So most of the nerfs and buffs that have happened over the last few patches have been to the higher tier tanks. Now Wargaming are turning their eyes to the lower tier tanks. They're also looking at the stats, and they're going to be buffing a lot of the underperforming tanks, and they're going to be nerfing a lot of the overperforming tanks, and this is what mainly this video is about. So we're going to start with the British tanks and see what's changed for the Brits. I do have some of the tanks, I don't have them all, so I think the best thing to do is look at this from the tech tree, and we'll head to the British, if I can find the flag. Here we go. And the first major change is that's going to happen is the Cruiser Mark 1. So that is a Tier 2 tank. And what's going to happen with the Cruiser is it is going to be buffed. Apparently this is an underperforming tank, and the way they're going to buff the Cruiser 1 is they're going to buff the pom-pom gun's reload time. And a lot of the nerfs and buffs are very, very small, so I'm not really going to go into the numbers. For example, the pom-pom gun has currently a reload time of 8 seconds. It's going to be buffed, so in patch 9.1 the reload time is going to be 7.8 seconds, so they're shaving 2 milliseconds off the reload time. It's not a lot, but it is a buff, but I'm not going to go into the exact figures. I'm just going to say whether it's been buffed or whether it's been nerfed. The next tank to receive buffs is the Vickers Medium 2. And this is another one of the underperforming tanks, so this is getting quite a few buffs. Both the stock and the upgraded turrets are getting view range buffs. Their turret traverse speed is being buffed by quite a big margin. And the aim time of the 3-pounder and the 6-pounder are also being buffed. So quite a few buffs for the medium 2 to maybe make it perform a little bit better. The next tank that is being affected by the buffs and nerfs is the Universal Carrier 2-pounder, and it's being buffed. The reverse speed on the this Tier 2 TD is going to be increased from 8 kilometers to 10 kilometers an hour, so it's going to be able to reverse faster. Also, the aim time of the final gun, the 6-pounder, that is being buffed. So a lot of the Tier 2 Brits are being buffed. However, there is some bad news, and it concerns the AT7, a tank I no longer own. But the AT7 apparently is overperforming. Now, I hated this tank when I played it. I am going to have to rebuy it to get an ace tanker in it, but I did hate it originally. But apparently, people have learned how to play it, and it is being nerfed because apparently it's overperforming. So what's happening is the final gun, the OQF 20-pounder, is going to have its reload time nerfed by quite a significant margin, by over half a second. And on top of that, its hit points are being nerfed. So very, very big nerfs for the AT7. And that rounds up the British tanks. Moving on to the Russians, and there are a lot of changes from the Russians. And again, the buffs and nerfs begin with the lower tier tanks. We're going to take a look at the AT1, and the AT1 is being buffed. The final gun, the 76L10S, is going to have its alpha damage buffed. Currently it's at 105 alpha damage, it's moving to 110. And that's it. Moving on to the next one. The BT7 is also going to be getting a buff, basically just the aim time again. So the aim time on the final gun, not the others, is going to get a fairly small buff. And the next one is a double. It concerns the T46 at Tier 3 and the T28 at Tier 4. And basically, the 76mm guns on both are going to get an alpha damage buff, so they're moving from 105 damage to 110, but that's pretty much it. Moving up the tiers, we're going to take a look at the MT25, which is the next tank that is going to be hugely buffed. In fact, it's going to be buffed to the point where I'm going to have to rebuy the flaming thing. I really don't like. I like my light tanks, I like my scouts, but I do not like the MT25. However, with the buffs it's going to be receiving, it is definitely going to have to be rebought and tried out again. The major buffs to note for the MT25 is that its terrain resistance is being improved immensely, and that makes this tank a little bit more viable, especially across rough ground. But the mega buff, the huge buff, the reason I'm going to have to rebuy this tank is the engine. The final engine is going to be moved from 600 horsepower to 700 horsepower, and that puts it pretty close to the original T50-2 levels. I loved the T50-2, and if the MT25, even though it's wider and bigger and it makes a much more easy target to hit, but if it moves and traverses terrain as well as the T50-2 did, it's definitely going to have to be a repurchase. So I'm kind of looking a little bit forward to this. The next tank to be affected by the buffs and nerfs is the SU-101. This was a tank I kind of enjoyed playing, but I had a hard time getting good games in. It's being buffed, not nerfed. Apparently it's underperforming. So basically, aiming on the move in this tank is going to be improved. Also, the final gun, the 100mm D54S, is having its aim time buffed by a small margin, but it's being buffed, and it's getting some more hit points, so it's going to have a few more hit points. Whether that's going to make the tank any easier or more fun to play, I have no idea, but we'll find out. And that is it for the Russians. Moving on to the Germans, and the first underperforming tank is going to be the Panzer I. The Panzer I is going to be getting a shooting on the move accuracy buff, and two of the guns are also going to be getting a aim time buff. Moving up to Tier 6, the Jagdpanzer IV is also reckoned to be underperforming. I'm looking forward to this because the Jagdpanzer IV is a tank I need to rebuy and master. The Jagdpanzer IV is getting a couple of minor buffs. Basically, the turn rate or traverse speed is going to be improved for both sets of tracks, and also the terrain resistance is being improved quite a bit. So this should make the tank a little bit more maneuverable. No buffs for the guns, unfortunately, but any buff is better than a nerf. Moving on to some overperforming tanks. Yes, the Tiger 1's going to be nerfed quite badly in quite a few ways. First of all, the reload time for the L71 is being nerfed. It's going to have a slower rate of fire slightly. The accuracy for the L71 has also been nerfed, and it's going to be slightly more inaccurate. And also, the accuracy when moving your turret is going to be nerfed. And in addition, it's going to be losing 100 hit points. So for this big box that anything can penetrate and it needed all its hit points, nope, the hit points are being nerfed too, quite significantly. And it doesn't stop there. My beloved Tiger P. I loved this tank first time round. It's apparently overperforming and is being hit by a nerf bat as well. Like the Tiger, the final gun, the L71, is going to have the reload time increased. Its accuracy is also being nerfed. It's going to become slightly more inaccurate, and just like the Tiger, it too is going to be suffering from a decrease in hit points. It's going to lose 100 hit points. Moving on. The VK3001P, one tier lower, has been buffed. It's going to get a small hit point buff. And finally, for the Germans, we have the VK2801, the Tier 6 light tank. A scout I used to enjoy before it was nerfed to death. Again, I'm going to have to rebuy this tank just to try it out because it's getting some really good buffs. The maximum speed is being buffed from 60 kilometers an hour at the moment up to 68 kilometers an hour. That could be really significant for this tank. And on top of that, the terrain resistance on both sets of tracks is also being improved. So it's going to be faster, it's going to lose less speed across rough ground, and it might become a little bit more viable to play. We'll find out when I come to rebuy it. And that rounds up the Germans. Moving on to the Americans, and I'm just going to skip right to the one you're all probably waiting for. The M18 Hellcat. The M18 Hellcat apparently is overperforming. Who would have guessed? And it is being nerfed into the ground. There are so many nerfs for the Hellcat, I don't know where to start. Well, let's just start with the final gun. The 90mm is going to have its reload speed nerfed. It's being nerfed by half a second. So it's going to take half a second longer to reload. And it doesn't stop there because the accuracy while shooting after moving your turret has been increased by 25%. In other words, when you've moved your turret to acquire a target, it's going to take a lot longer for the gun sight to settle down and minimize to where you can actually fire an accurate shot. That's a pretty big nerf. The reverse speed has been nerfed as well, so at the moment it's got a 20 kilometer reverse speed. That's been nerfed to a paltry 12 kilometers, so the tactic of poking out and shooting at a target and reversing into cover very quickly isn't going to be as viable, because that reverse speed nerf included with the turret on the move accuracy change is going to make it very difficult for peekaboo tactics. In addition, the terrain resistance has been nerfed, so the Hellcat's going to struggle on rough and swampy ground a lot more than it used to. And the ability of the Hellcat to shoot at targets while moving, so shooting on the move, has been nerfed hugely by as much as 60%. It's going to be 60% more inaccurate when shooting on the move. And don't forget, the Hellcat is also a TD, so it's going to suffer from that camo nerf for all TDs when firing its gun. So one of the stat patter's tanks of choice is being really badly hit in the 9.1 update. Is it still going to be as popular, or are people going to move across to the Jackson? I guess we're just going to have to find out. The next tank we're going to look at is the M4, and it is being hit with the Nerf bat, and to be honest, I can't say I'm too unhappy about it. The M4 is hideously overpowered. It's been nerfed in the past. Its HE damage on the derp gun was nerfed, but it still was overperforming. 101 millimeters of penetration with HE ammo on this derp gun is just ridiculous for this tank, but unfortunately that penetration is still going to exist. What is happening for those M4 derpers is the aim time is being increased and the reload time is being increased by a full second, so it's going to take them a lot longer to derp you, but they're still going to be doing all that damage. I don't think it's going to affect M4 lovers that much. Slightly longer aim time, slightly longer reload time, but I still see this tank as being an overperformer. Moving on to the next probably overpowered tank. They're probably one of the most overpowered tanks at Tier 2, the T18. Usually one of the puppy kickers' tanks of choice. It has been overpowered for so long, and Wargaming are finally going to do something about it, and like the Hellcat, the T18 is being nerfed into the ground. There are so many nerfs here, it is again difficult to know where to start, so let's just start with the big one. The hit points are being nerfed, not by much, but then again at low tier every hit point matters, so it is getting a hit point nerf. The reload time on both the final guns, both the derp gun and the 2-pounder, are being nerfed. In addition, the aim circle is going to get bigger, so basically after moving your gun to acquire a target, it's going to take longer for the reticule to settle on that target, so that's another pretty big nerf. The reverse speed has been nerfed from 8 kilometers an hour to 6 kilometers an hour. Again, it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for T18s to poke out of cover, shoot, and then get back into cover, but it's a small nerf, but it's a nerf. The terrain resistance on the T18 has also been increased, so it's suffered a pretty big nerf by, in some cases, up to 45% more difficulty on rough terrain. And another big nerf is the traverse speed. The turn time of the T18 has been increased by quite a significant margin, almost 30 to 40%. So it's going to be 30 or 40% slower traversing, or basically just turning. Moving on to another puppy kicker's tank of choice, the Tier 4 T40. It's getting a small nerf. It's considered to be overperforming. It's getting a small nerf. Its view range, which is currently at 400 meters, is being nerfed down to 370 meters. Again, if someone is puppy kicking in this tank, they're going to fit it with binocs. They're going to have a good crew in it. I don't think it's going to affect the T40 that much, but it's overperforming and it is a nerf. The T29. The view range on the final turret has been nerfed by 10 meters on the T29. The aim time after turning the turret and turning the hull have both been increased, so it's going to take a lot longer to get your gun on target. The terrain resistance has also been increased, so the tank is going to be a lot slower over rough ground. And the reload time has been nerfed by about half a second, so it's going to take a lot longer to reload, but it's also going to take a lot longer to get your gun on target. And when you consider that it's received a aim time nerf when you've moved your hull, and also a second aim time nerf from when you moved your turret, if you're turning your tank to track a target, it's going to take a very long time to get that gun reticule down. The T32 at Tier 8, however, has received a tiny buff. The accuracy on the 105mm has been increased. At the moment it's 0.41. It's going to be increased to 0.4, which puts it around Chinese level of accuracy, but it is a buff, a small buff, but it is a buff. So that's it from the information that's currently available regarding 9.1, and again, this is early information, it's subject to change, and you'll notice that there weren't any buffs or nerfs announced for any Chinese, French or Japanese tanks. Also, the long-awaited KV-1S nerf or split or whatever they decide to do with it is not going to be happening in 9.1, but having said that, this is all information that's subject to change. It's very, very early information at this time. There are a lot of other updates in 9.1 and they will be the subject of another video. Let me know what you think about the nerfs, the buffs. What are you looking forward to? What are you dreading? And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.